Hello, everybody. Hold on one second. Okay. It is Sunday, January 8th. A day later than usual. A couple hours later than usual. Because the weekend was a little different. My birthday was yesterday. And I was doing things. And I didn't want to try and figure out where to squeeze in live streaming. So we're doing it today. But next weekend, I intend to be switching back to Saturday. At least for default. Every once in a while, I'll have to move it around. But next Saturday, at least, will be the next live stream. Okay, so I'm going to do this count right now because I actually don't know off the top of my head. So I started a new page yesterday, which is sort of on schedule. Not sort of, it is on schedule. Once I finish that page, this page I'm working on right now, I will have, let's see how many pages left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 pages left. Maybe even 9, depending on how you would count a 2-page spread. Which is debatable. I mean, you might say like, well, what 2-page spread? That's 2 pages. Yeah, maybe it is 2 pages, but it's also one large, wide piece. To me, it's like to me that just, I don't know. It feels like it's the way my brain works. That's like a page is a piece. A 2-page spread is sort of a piece. In any case, once I finish the page I started yesterday, 9 or 10 pages left. Probably 10 the way I would count it. Which means this time 2 weeks from now, I should be in single-digit pages left. With an asterisk. We'll get into the asterisk. But single-digit pages left, which feels good. Feels really good. And I was looking ahead. I even have on my calendar marked like when I should be starting the last page, just to kind of keep an eye on like getting closer and closer to it. With the exception of the aforementioned 2-page spread, I'm just scanning to see. Now, there's always little variables and things that I didn't anticipate until I start the page, but just looking at my plan, none of the remaining pages are giving me a ton of anxiety. Like they're very, like, I think with the exception of the 2-page spread, the worst pages are behind me. The biggest headache pages are behind me, that also feels nice. So not only is the end in sight, not only is it, it's easier to picture actually finishing. None of the pages I have ahead of me are a nightmare that I'm worried, like, I don't even know how I'm going to draw that, or I've never drawn anything like that before, or that's going to be really complicated, and like there's a lot of things going on there. It's going to take whatever. None of that's the case. With the exception of the 2-page spread, but I'm looking forward to the 2-page spread because, well, one, it'll be a nice change of pace. Oh, I didn't even have the comment window up. Stretch. So you are, I guess. You're not home. Which, by the way, if anybody's watching and wants to pop on, I'll try to check my Facebook at some point, but message me and I'll send you a link. Anyway, what was I saying? 2-page spread. I did not sleep last night. I don't know why. I think because I ate too much like weird food for my birthday. I had like a crazy, the most wonderful cheeseburger I think I've ever had, and a 10.5% beer. And then for dessert, I had a like a lemon meringue tart thing, like a sort of birthday, like. And I maybe the combination of that or something, just like I slept weird. I usually don't eat like that. I eat a little bit like a monk. It's pretty boring. I will go and have, like crazy tacos with, or something like with Jim or whatever. Like I'll eat a little outside of the monk life once in a while. But generally day to day, it's a lot of like boring, healthy, simple food. So I think it just made my body was like, what did you do to me? Anyway, that doesn't have anything to do with anything. 2-page spread. What was I talking about? Oh, I'm looking forward to drawing it, even though it might be difficult. It will be difficult. It'll be difficult drawing. 2-page spread, you want it to be splashy. You want it to look cool. That's your opportunity to really get a little lost in like the fun little details and things. But I'm looking forward to it because one, it'll be a nice change of pace. I mean, at that point, when I do that, I will have done like 50 odd pages of fairly conventional comic pages. There have been some one panel pages, but actually, I just want to look at something. Just something occurred to me. I want to look at one of my pages. Okay. I wanted to say like I've got like a couple of full bleed pages in here. And then I was doubting myself. Did I do it full bleed? I did. This one will be too, the 2-page spread. Like I said, it'll be a nice change of pace. And it is, the vision for that spread is something, it was one of the earliest things I had in mind for this comic. So it's fun to finally get to it. Most the things I've been like wanting to get to, there's only a couple things left on like my plan that were some of the most original key ideas of like, there'll be something like this, there'll be a panel like this, there'll be a page like this, there'll be a 2-page spread like this, whatever. Most of those at this point, because I'm getting close to the end, I've checked off all the big things. It's like, oh, I can't wait to draw that. Can't wait to draw that. That'll be fun to draw. That'll be a nice milestone when I draw it. There's only 2 left. One is the 2-page spread, and there's another one on page. Oh, the page after that. And once I have those knocked out, oh no, there's one more after that. So I have 3 things left where I'll feel like once I've drawn those 3 things, I've drawn basically everything there is to draw in this book. Not literally, there's still drawing to do, but all like the main, every character's been introduced. Every vision in my head that I was like, that seemed like big, iconic images D vs. M 1979, when I was imagining it and writing the script, they will have been drawn. It'll just be at that point just winding it down. So anyway, getting there. Pretty close. I'm hoping of the page that I started yesterday, it's 6 panels. 5 of the 6 are fairly straightforward. One of them is going to be the one that's a big pain. And that's that one. I also need to do a reference selfie today, because I could sort of freehand it. It's an obviously it's an anatomy thing since it's a reference selfie. I could sort of freehand it, and I I just feel like, you know what, I think I need to just set up the little camera and the clicker and get a something to look at, because I'm picturing a sort of like a weird posture, and I think it would help me. So I got to do that sometime today. Paul, how are you doing? Stratego. After we did the top 5 board games, I really want to try Stratego. It sounds like it's fun. I don't know if it's Stratego or Stratego. I think it's Stratego. No, I didn't. Okay. What else? I think that's all comic-wise in terms of updates. Oh, so the asterisks, when I said like, hey, I'll be in 9 or 10 pages left, the asterisk is, and you've heard me talk about this before, everything else that goes around the comic. So I need to write the intro, I need to do the fake news article, I need to do the leaked document stuff, I need to do a thank you page. I need, like, there's just all this other stuff that goes around it, you know, that sandwiches the story. The story, that's like, okay, 9 or 10 more pages to draw that. But there's still more to do with the book. So, but that will be preferable and easier than drawing. No offense to the writers out there, of which I am one, by the way. Drawing is harder than writing. Like, I'm, at least I'll qualify it, settle down, at least for me. But I kind of think generally anyway, you know, I mean, drawing is just, it's way more exhausting, way more taxing. It's like there's, for no other, just the simplest explanation of all, compare the amount of work that goes into typing D-E-S-K, desk, and drawing a desk. Like, you know, yes, writing is hard. Writing can be hard, coming up with, and the craft of it, like making it readable and fun to read and coming up with the right way to say something and coming up with the right way to describe something. Yeah, there's a lot of challenge in that. I would say I'll just go ahead and, you know, in this particular battle, fight on the side of the artists. Not as hard as actually having to, you know, make that thing visual. But let's see here. Wait, let's go. It sounds fun. I had never played it. I was always aware of it. I mean, you always see it in the board game section, but then it was finally explained how it works to me, and it's like, I want to try that. That sounds like fun. Wait, whoop. Trying takes longer. It's easier though. Takes longer. It's easier. It definitely takes longer. 100%. I don't know if I agree with easier. And obviously it's super subjective, you know, but for me, obviously 100% personal, but I can just say, like, I've never, sometimes when I sit down to draw for the day, I feel like I have to gather my strength, you know, and I've never felt that way with writing. Like writing to me is more almost recreational. Like it can be very hard. It can be challenging. It can be frustrating. Like, it can be all those things. But I generally just sort of enjoy it more. And I enjoy the puzzle of it more. I think that's maybe the difference. I think with drawing, when I'm having trouble getting it to look the way I want it to look, I get frustrated and I get grumpy and I get pissed off and I get sort of irritated by my own lack of ability. With writing, I have a much better attitude about it, where it's just, it seems to come more easily. And when it's not working, I have a lot of confidence that, like, it'll eventually work out. Like I don't sit and kind of get annoyed with myself and frustrated and wishing it was looking different or wishing, it's, I don't know. That's just me, obviously. But no, that's just it. Thousand Monkeys could come up with all of Shakespeare's plays. Could they come up with the Mona Lisa? I don't know. I know. I'm sorry. Look, it was available. Again, referencing back to the monk eating, I don't drink soda. I don't do sugar. So, I mean, I once in a while will have sugar, but I don't do sugary drinks. So, if it's the options are water, black coffee, or LaCroix. So, Christopher. So, if you're still game, for everyone who's watching, either live or on the replay, I will probably be appearing on Christopher's live stream tomorrow. I don't think we have a topic yet. Christopher, I don't know if you thought of anything. I've thought a little bit about things, but I don't know. It doesn't really matter to me. I would defer to you if you had an idea. But anyway, he live streams, I believe, every day during the week. And I will be hopping on his stream tomorrow. If that still works for you, Chris, if that's still, whatever. But anyway. All right. And I am opening myself up to being accused of being a fancy white, but again, it doesn't have sugar. If you scribble notes on a notepad on the it isn't too weird, but if you bring an easel or charcoals in there, people call you weird. Yeah, I'm probably so it's a work from home day, but I'm going to clock out, obviously. No, I'll just stay on the clock and, live stream. This is work related, right? Yeah. So, no, that's usually I'm listening to his live stream while I'm at work. Like while I'm doing stuff, I'll just have it, I'll be listening to the audio. Once in a while, I'll switch over to kind of look or to leave a comment or something. But 1 to 2 days a week, I work from home, and tomorrow is going to be one of those days. So, there we go. I did also, what else did so last night I wanted to see a movie. And so I went and saw, or we went, Mary and I went and saw The Fabelmans, which I was excited to see. I really liked it. For those who are, Fabelmans is like Steven Spielberg's semi-autobiographical movie about him, mostly as a teenager. There's a little bit of younger, but mostly it's on his teen years. Is that a problem? But there was one, I did have one thing, and I'm reluctant to bring this up because I did one episode, I believe, sharing my thoughts on AI generated imagery. And it was kind of just because people kept asking me about it, so I gave my opinion publicly, and then I haven't really wanted to engage in it since, just because, well, first of all, I don't like to try and chase whatever the trendy topic is. That's one. And then second, honestly, I think it kind of, I've talked about this before. I try to keep this fairly positive. And I think that topic, it makes me, remember last episode last episode or the one before, I said that Chris wanted me to start doing a series on my YouTube that's Don't Get Me Started, where I just start ranting about things. That is something where I could see myself ranting, like, because it, like most artists I know, it is upsetting or annoying or problematic or troubling, or, you know, it's a lot of negative reaction to the whole AI generated imagery thing. So that's my preamble. But there was something about the Fabelmans that made me think about, and that's made me think about AI generated imagery, which might seem weird. How is a movie about Steven Spielberg in the 60s as a kid discovering his love for movies and making movies? How can you even relate that? I'll tell you how. Okay, so it shows a lot of the movie is spent with him. He's working with his old little 8mm and I think 16mm cameras and shooting movies with his friends. Like, he would recruit all his friends and like people he went to school with and write movies and have them like make westerns or have them make little war movies or whatever. He would set up, like, it was very low tech. One thing that did kind of remind me a little bit of my process is, as I've talked about a lot, I like to work from live model references. Whether it's an alien, whether it's whatever it is, like, I like to have at some point had a human being pose in the position that I think I'm going to want and have a photograph of that to work from. And so I'm doing a lot on a much smaller scale, but a lot what he was, where he's like, I want to make a Western, or I want to make my own war movie. And he would go and just draft all his friends and like cast them in all these different parts and do it. There's a little bit of that with D versus M, where I come up with a character and it's like, all right, who do I know that I think sort of could, you know, there's something about them that I think fits for this. And I would like ask, beg and plead for them to like, will you sit for 200 or 300 photos, you know, doing different things, pretending to hold a ray gun, pretending to run away from something, whatever. And so I have all these images. That was familiar. But anyway, so he'd film all this stuff. Remember, this is very low tech. It's all on actual film. I don't know. I'm not a movie guy, and certainly not like a 60s movie guy. So I don't know what any of this equipment is. But basically it looked like, so you know, you take all these, you're filming all these segments and you're having to splice all this together. You're kind of rolling it through a little viewer and finding the part where you want to do a cut, and you make a cut, and then you have to kind of glue the ends together with the next part. It's this very manual and like fiddly and slow little process. Just completely laborious. And then he's doing all these little things for effects. Like in one of his, he's got like in one of his, I think it was the Western, he's got his friends playing with like toy guns, and it looks like there's muzzle flashes. And his dad asks him, like, how did you do that with them? How did you make it look like they were firing? And what he would do is he would like take a little needle on the film and poke holes where the barrel was when it was firing. So when you project it, the light goes through, they're really bright. And it kind of looks like a, you know, a blown out, it looks like a muzzle flash. This little stuff, and you can, it's a lot of, which seems probably accurate. You see a little bit of him filming his friends while they're running around with toy guns. You see a lot more like of him sitting and previewing the film and snipping it and gluing it together and doing it again to see how it's going, and all these strips labeled and like taped down to the table next to him so he can find scenes and stuff. The ratio of that, the actual like putting this thing together, to actually what you would maybe think is the fun part, filming, or the even more fun part, the projecting of it, like the showing it to people. The ratio, it kind of goes like that. Like the shortest amount of time is letting it play. The next shortest is actually doing the filming. And then the majority of the time spent is like actually physically cobbling this thing together. Which also is familiar because I feel like, you know, drawing the book is what takes the vast majority of the time. Coming up with the idea is maybe more fun, but that's less time. And then like the amount of time someone's going to spend reading it, that's like this much compared to all the rest. Again, what does this have to do with AI? It occurred to me while I was sitting and watching this, watching his depiction of how this works. That you could only do this if you were just totally madly in love with this thing, totally passionate. Like because it's so much work. It's intense, long, boring, frustrating work. And the only thing that will get you over that hump, get you up that mountain, is just being a fanatic for wanting to do this thing. And it made me think about how, now you could do the stuff Spielberg was doing, like on your cell phone, in probably a tiny fraction of the time. I mean, a kid today who decides I want to put together a movie with my friends, it's not nearly as expensive, not nearly as time consuming, it doesn't require nearly as much knowledge or skill or ability, but also importantly, it doesn't require nearly as much passion. And that's sort of the interesting trade-off in progress. With advancements comes ease. Okay? And with ease comes accessibility. And, i.e. a lower barrier of entry. Okay? Now, we think of that as a universal good. And I think it is very good in a lot of ways. The fact that I, as a mostly digital artist, don't have to mix my own pigments and don't have to stretch my own canvas and don't have all these kinds of things. And I have straight edges for lines and things like that. That makes it more attainable for me. And 100%, it makes the barrier of entry in terms of how much skill I need, how much technique I need, how much ability I need, much lower. There are more people now who can participate in the arts because it's not required. I mean, just think of all the things that you needed even 40 years ago to be an artist. Not only did you need a whole suite of skills that a lot of us don't have now and never learned and maybe wouldn't even be able to learn, but also the money. If you're talking about photography, the amount of money it costs to not only the equipment, but developing film, the chemicals to develop films, that's a lot, or oil. Have you shopped for oil paints? It's hugely expensive. We complain about the cost of an Adobe subscription. It's nothing compared to if you were working traditionally. It's a bargain. And that all feels good, I guess. But what occurred to me when I was watching Fabelmans was, again, what I said before, what got him through a lot of that obstacle of having to learn the tedium and the skill and the fussiness and all that, having to learn how to do this thing, was his unadulterated passion for it. And what it means is if you are a kid today and you want to make movies and you can do it with this, you don't need as much passion. Passion is not a prerequisite to making art. And that, and I hate to sound like some sort of Luddite, but that does concern me. I think it contributes to what I've described. I'm quoting Andrew Keen, who's a writer, a thinker, how a lot of art today, it's like an ocean of garbage because there's no barrier of entry. Everybody can make their thing. Everybody can put it out there. In a lot of ways, that's great. Probably in most ways, that's great. The problem of it is it's what he would describe as the ocean of garbage. There's this just completely never-ending landscape of every kind of thing you can think of: music, movie, and video, animated stuff, comics, books, all of it. And it's the result, the glut of it makes it harder and harder to find the stuff that's truly extraordinary. that's, I think, the trade-off. If you remove gatekeepers, well, now it's just a free-for-all. And how do you find, the only thing that you could say that was maybe good about gatekeepers is there is some curation happening, good or bad. In the right or wrong direction, there is some winnowing of the thing. So in theory, what you're being presented, there is some kind of, it maybe, again, there's a curation to it. I'm going to circle back to this. I want to just see what's going on in the chat. I have not watched Pennyworth. Yeah, terrible. What happened to big quill feather pens? That's my question. Yeah, I do. Yeah, Keene is a fascinating person to read. And that phrase always stuck in my head. Years ago, when I read a book of his and saw him speaking about different things, the ocean of garbage. And his concern at the time was, and it's, I think, similar to the concern that crystallized for me with watching Fabelmans and thinking about something like AI imagery, is he said, yes, Keene would basically say, yes, we've lowered the barrier of entry. And the problem with that is that no one's amassing expertise. Like to become Martin Scorsese, like, requires a more difficult path than just like someone shooting something on their phone. You like, and in toiling and toiling and toiling and having to come up with the money to get the film developed and having to haul the equipment and having to sit and work and try and find a way in and actually get in there and manage to navigate those choppy waters of like the studio system and everything, that process is what creates a great artist. And by equalizing everything and removing almost all the obstacles and just opening, like, there's no gatekeepers anymore, there's no barriers of entry anymore, no one is getting sharpened to the point of being a great artist. There are just there's just an endless mob of talented amateurs. I think that's sort of what he would say. Okay, I'm skirting around that. I'm more saying that what I thought about watching the Fabelmans was not even thinking about expertise, not even thinking about skill and ability, like or whatever kind of technical mastery you're achieving. Just the love of it. Just the love of it. Like the people who were deciding they wanted to make movies 80 years ago had to love it way, 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 way more than someone who wants to make movies today. They don't have to love it as much. And the reason is because it's not as hard. And the reason you would stick with something that's hard is because you love it, because you're nuts about it, because you're passionate about it, because it's the thing you have to do. Where if maybe people today with no barriers of entry, if it was as hard as that, they wouldn't do it. And that's where I finally ended up thinking about AI imagery, where when I think there's a lot of complaints you can level against it, and I agree with almost all of them. But one that occurred to me by watching the Fabelmans was there is no evidence of any love in someone who thinks that this is their path to making something that approximates art. Because there is no requirement. There is no barrier of entry now when it comes to passion. All you need is an idea, and an idea doesn't require passion. That's how I got from the Fabelmans to AI generated imagery. That's it. I don't know. We'll see. I don't know if anyone has a thought on that, but yes. Yeah, that's kind of Keene 101. Which, and also something I referenced before, this basic idea that gatekeepers weren't a universally unequivocal evil. That there is some value in editors, that there is some value in publishers, that there is some value in someone, lots of people are trying to get their short story in the magazine, or their art in the gallery, or their movie in the film festival, or whatever. That there is some value in someone looking at all these submissions and deciding, like, which is the thing. Now, is that super abusable? Of course. Is that a way to shut out sort of minority voices or underrepresented voices or creators? Of course, like, it's not saying that, like, oh, it was all working fine before and then we blew it up with the internet. Nobody's saying that, okay? But that we lost something in blowing up that system with just, like, now we've got YouTube. Now there's lots of ways to you can self-publish. You can throw your movie on YouTube. You can throw, like, all that. There was something very valuable we lost. And now it just allows everyone to put their voice out there, which is not, I'm not saying, no one mistake me, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's a great thing. I'm doing it. But as the barrier of entry, this was the big aha moment. If there's one thing I want to say, as the barrier of entry gets lower, so also the level of love, passion, commitment, care, seriousness about the craft drops. It drops with it, okay? And that is a concern for me. Less so the rest of it. Less so Keen's ocean of garbage. More so that you're getting work that is kind of a whim, that someone wasn't madly in love with, that someone didn't have to put out there come hell or high water, that isn't something that someone would be willing to sit in a dark room and splice together 8mm film for weeks just to produce a little 15-minute movie. Like, that person isn't as represented when you make it really easy. Now, that in and of itself, that's not an argument like, oh, we need to make it hard again. But it just, I think, if there's any kind of thing that I would like to see from it, if I were king, I would like to see audiences and other artists favor art that was made out of serious commitment and passion, not shit done on a lark, because I've got a phone and I can edit on it, so I'm going to put something together. That's great. And if it makes you happy, I'm not going to say, like, you shouldn't do that. But I think my reaction to this whole thing was, I'm going to start favoring artists who are doing the work, and have to do the work, and are suffering a little bit for their work, which is kind of old school, but I think I want to know, how badly did you need this thing out there? Like, how hard were you willing to fight to get it out? And I maybe this is, like, striking me right now, maybe because it was the movie, maybe because it was the AI imagery thing, or maybe it's because I've spent almost a year using all my free time drawing a book, where it's very hard for me to take seriously someone who wants to find all the shortcuts. Like, and again, to be fair, I'm using shortcuts. We're all using shortcuts. None of us are mixing our own tempura paints out of eggs, from our own chicken in the backyard. Like, we're all, but I do feel like, and I know this is just something generations will say, and younger generations, like, you sound like an old man. There has to be some limit to that, right? If we ever get to the point where you can just, like, cross your arms like I do Magini and blink and make the thing in your head, I think, to me at least, there's a question about whether that has any value, because it didn't mean enough to you to fight for it. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, look, it's a hot take, and he's not. Lots of people are rubbed the wrong way by Keen. I personally think there's something to it. At least I don't know if, like, I wouldn't call myself, oh, I'm a disciple. But I feel like I can't rule out what he's saying just out of hand. Like it is I think there's something to that, but that's true. Yeah. And that would be maybe that'd probably be the counter argument is all we did is just inject more of everything into the mix. That democratization and lowering or removing barriers of entry for creatives. Yes, there's more garbage, but arguably, art has always been mostly garbage. You know, like, I mean, that's what makes great art great. Part of it is that it's hard to do, it's uncommon. You know, if everyone could do amazing, astonishing, astounding, mind-blowing art, would we even care as much? Like, that's what makes you train on something once in a while and say, like, that's remarkable. So maybe, yeah, it's just that like there's more of it, therefore there's more of everything. There's more garbage, but there's also maybe more truly transcendent stuff out there. Maybe. Well, and I do think, and this is something Keane is kind of cynical about, but I am hopeful about. I don't know if I would bet on it. It's like what I hope this all ends up going toward. I think right now we're in sort of a weird destabilized, like it was sort of a paradigm blowing, exploding era of history that we're in, where we were doing it a certain way and making the best of that. It maybe wasn't the best approach, but it was the way we were doing it. And then with basically the rise of the internet, there was this well, what Keane would describe too as the rise of the amateur. Okay. Now, when he says it very negatively, and he picks out all the bad examples of it. And there are lots of bad examples of it that I think most of us can agree on. Like, you know, 10 years ago, when they first started, the anti-vax thing started rising. Like, you would see point counterpoints with, on one side, like a epidemiologist or, you know, someone like someone who has spent their life studying this. And on the other side, you'd have someone like, you know, Jenny McCarthy talking about how, you know, just talking pseudoscience. Okay. That, you know, Keane would say that is a direct result of the rise of the amateur, the cult of the amateur. This idea that expertise and mastery and education and experience not only at best maybe has no value, and at worst has like a negative value. And I think an example of that would be like maybe the and trying to, you know, just stay with me here. I'm not going to get political, but like the Trump Clinton face off. Okay. You have a person on one side who has spent their whole life learning and devoted to understanding government. Okay. This is a career bureaucrat versus someone who had zero experience in that realm. And the majority of the electorate favored the person who had zero experience because Clinton's experience was viewed by some people as a negative. To me, that would be Keane's evidence in action, cult of the amateur. That like, oh, you know, all your book learning is not only bad, it's actually worse. It's worse than like not knowing anything about anything, you know. Oh no, I'm seeing the chat. Let's see here. Think about that. You know, I don't think this was the takeaway you intended, but I'm talking about how did we lose something, or what have we lost by making it so you don't have to be passion. You don't need passion to make art, or less passion than ever before to make art. But let's talk about the audience. Let's talk about this. You need less interest or than ever to even consume it. Like it's just like think of the people who had to work to appreciate the cave paintings, who had to crawl through lengths of cave with dim little firelight to enjoy these murals. Like think of that in terms of like what's being asked of the audience. And that's something I think that also comes up a lot, and that's never going to go away. This idea of like, how much do you demand of the audience? Do you make it totally easy and accessible? I was just reading the other day, I don't know what sent me down this rabbit hole. I was reading about Tom Bombadil in Lord of the Rings. For people who have read the book, do you remember Tom Bombadil? This weird random character that almost serves no purpose to the story. It's just this crazy, strange being that the hobbits come across in, I think, Fellowship of the Ring. This weird kind of forest spirit person, okay? And Tolkien made a point his whole life of never really talking about what that character represents, and making him deliberately kind of inscrutable. And you see it's interesting. You see that debate all the time with art. It's like, how much is it fair to make the audience work? You hear it with movies all the time. If you talk about like a Fellini movie or something, there's sort of two schools of thought. Are you hand-holding your audience through this little journey of your movie or your book or your comic or whatever? Are you making it very easy and fun and like something that's just, and they get it and they can wrap their brain around it and they feel good afterward? Or are you challenging them? Like something, I'm not a huge David Lynch fan, but something I do like about him is the fact a lot of times I'm watching his stuff and I'm just sort of maddened by the fact that it's like, what is he doing? What does this mean? What is this about? I respect that. That like he's not interested in hand-holding the audience, that he's not worried about upsetting the audience or challenging the audience or confusing the audience. The people doing the cave paintings, they weren't worried about, Grog over there saying like, can't this be out of the cave where I can just look at it outside? Like, you're gonna make me crawl in there it's dark in there. I gotta hold a torch and crawl like half a mile to look at your painting of a bison? But I respect the guy who was in there. It's like, no, because now I'm gonna make you earn this. I'm gonna make you think this is part of the experience. Anyway. Yeah, it's smarty folks talk. Well, and also talking about painting with poop. I don't know what that is. Yeah, well, I think, again, my sort of little takeaway from the Fabelmans is that you're not going to do the work without the passion. The passion needs to be there to do the work. And I guess the question is, if you don't need passion to do the work, if the work has been made so easy and advancements has removed any real level of work that you need to do, so you don't need as much passion, is that the same? And is that something that you're interested in? And I feel like, maybe snootily, I'm not interested. I'm not interested in all of it. I'm not interested in like paving the swamp. I'm interested in work from people who put on the boots and like trudged through it. And again, it's a line. It's an arbitrary line. Where are you drawing it? What's work and what's paving the swamp? I think AI generated imagery is not only paving the swamp, you've got like one of those like moving walkways like at the airport through the swamp. Like you're not doing anything. And to me, my gut, I can give you lots of intellectual arguments against AI generated imagery. But to me, most fundamentally, I have a visceral emotional reaction to it. It's like, I don't care. I don't care like an idea you had that you had somebody else do or some robot do. Like I want to see something that came out of the fire, that came out of the need, the passion, the obsession, that you were willing to do the work. If you didn't care enough to do the work, why should I care about seeing it? That's me. I think that's where that was the big takeaway. But. It is my belief that our capacity for inspiration and passion is not diminished by ease of use and accessibility. I don't know if I agree or disagree with this. I think I'm saying something slightly different. I think I'm saying and this is just a purely subjective thing. I think I'm more interested in art that came out of a need to make it, a passion that yes, it's not even a question of how hard you worked. Really, I think how hard you worked is more of an indicator of your level of passion, if that makes sense. And when you remove all the obstacles, it's hard to gauge how much passion was actually there. Like, so I guess what I'm saying, and I realize this is a very personal, like individual thing. If you were mixing your own paints, your pigments, if you were stretching your own canvas, honestly, I don't know if that means anything to me. Like that in and of itself, other than it indicates passion and commitment to the work. And that's what I'm responding to. And therefore, I think it's, to me, like I'm seeing them all over now, like these people who are making their comics strictly off of, like, it's all AI generated imagery. And you can tell immediately when you see it, you can tell because the panels they seem like unrelated panels. It's all of like, one person sort of just staring. You can tell it doesn't quite match whatever the narrative is. Anyway, to me, that doesn't represent what I don't know this person. I can't say anything about the work. I've not read it. But what I can say is that it didn't take any discipline to make it. And that makes a difference to me. Okay, so this is the most important thing. My hot photo here, 69 XXX Life. That's an interesting, it's a good contribution to the talk. Let's see here, block user. I don't have to do this very often, but there we go. I might suggest that a real problem has always been popular marketed Shinola by people with connections and accommodation seems to repeatedly get attention over passionate hard work in me. Well, I mean, I bet collectively we could come up with lots and lots of problems in art, and that's always been for sure one. But settle down. Yeah, I do. I just as an indicator of commitment, I think what I'm responding to is I like to feel like someone has skin in the game, in a real way, like not just I hope you like it, which is I think that's what it's been reduced to now, is like that's the most, you know, where there was no, again, I'm kind of trying to figure out what this means to me in sort of real time. So probably 3 days from now, I'd be able to be a little sharper or crisper with when I'm thinking about this. But I guess most fundamentally is, I think right now, like my thesis is what I just said a few lines ago, which was, if you don't care enough to do the work, I don't care enough to experience it. And that's just one audience member, me. Like I think I would rather read a bad comic that someone slaved over for years than a okay comic that someone generated purely through like AI prompts that are stealing other people's work in 3 weeks. You know, I just because I couldn't tell you why. It's just my taste, I guess, or my whatever. I don't know. But there's something in there. It's something about that. I do, I guess, see a relationship between how hard are you working and how worthwhile this is. And I don't know if that's, obviously, again, this is just me, you know. But ours, yes, though I would argue that when we're talking about the AI thing, well, I mean, what's the human part? You know? I mean, what's funny is like this has been my objection to a lot of the AI stuff. It's like I don't care what some weird algorithm has to say creatively. Like I'm not interested in that. I'm not going to understand the world better. I'm not going to learn empathy better. I'm not going to have an aha moment from a robot collage. And I'm not going to relate more. Like I think sometimes the art I like most is sometimes when I like experience it and it makes me like, oh, so that's what that's like. That life is like, that perspective is like, that experience is like, that's what that feeling is like. It gives you it's the kinship. It's the I am that thing. Like you suddenly there for a moment you experience like, I know I get this person now. There's no person to get from like and even if and that's distinct from whether it looks cool, and it's distinct from whether I can have a reaction to it, an emotional reaction to it. It's strictly like, is there a humanity there to connect with? And at best, what you're getting with the AI stuff is it's the equivalent of someone commissioned something and is showing you that. Where, so for example, this is the same thing. I would have the same exact reaction. Let's take AI out of it. If someone was kickstarting their comic, okay, and they said, I had the idea, I had someone else write it, and someone else draw it, and someone else do the colors, and someone else do the lettering, someone else polish the dialogue. Like they outsourced all of it. They had the idea. They had the kernel of the idea. I'm not interested in talking to that guy. Like if it was like, I want to have like, and I read this thing and I loved it. Who am I going to have on this show to talk to them? Not that guy. I want to talk to the writer. I want to talk to the artist. I want to talk to, you know what I mean? Like I'm not in, like that is the least of it to me. So that's, I don't know. Right. I advocate that people should do whatever they feel compelled to create in their art as it is a form of communication. I agree. Chris has a good live stream. Anyway, I didn't expect to talk about that as long as I did, but that was, I think that was the one of my many reactions to The Fabelmans was, I'm not going to say that Spielberg, I won't say that we'll never have more directors of the caliber of Spielberg because it was hard when he had to do it and it's easier now. That's not what I'm saying. I guess what I'm saying, if anything, is good or bad, there was some form of a meritocracy in place when it was hard. At least in the most basic, clunky way. That like to even make this happen, you had to work and pay your dues. And learn like a lot of tiny, weird technical stuff. And that, to me, I guess that says something, you know. I don't know. I'm fumbling around an idea. It's because I just saw the movie last night, and you know, it struck me. And anyway, you're welcome. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And like I said, it doesn't make him necessarily better. It just the people who will actually finish the race are the ones that worked hardest, I guess. And at that time, that was sort of the analogy. And at this time, it's, you know, it's less relevant, I guess. I don't know. Did I find the Fabelmans artistically inspiring? I don't know if I'd go that far. But I found a lot of it very familiar. And I don't want to spoil too much of it. But I think anyone who, the one thing that was, and this is why I think I responded to it, this idea of like there's a level of Jim, you and I, we've talked about this a lot. There's this sort of need to do the thing that you don't need to be pushed or prompted or encouraged to kind of sit and put your head down and slave away at something for months or years longer than most people would even be able to understand. And that is something like that is sort of there's obviously a theme of that, an element of that in that movie and that familiarity. And there's also, it's a lot about this sounds so trite when I say it out loud, but actually it's handled really well. There's a lot about being true to yourself and sort of chasing your dreams and chasing your passions. But what's interesting about it, and this is where I told you, I texted you last night, it's like it's a little bit darker than I expected. Like sometimes at one's own peril, you know, both ways. You can decide I'm not going to do the thing I'm passionate about and suffer for it, but you can also suffer doing the thing you love, you know? And I think that was an interesting, I think that inspiring, I wouldn't say inspiring, but relatable in lots of ways, even in your own, like my own small ways, You know, I'm not comparing myself like, oh, me and Spielberg are just like this. No, but the recognizing the kinship of people who are, they kind of have, are compelled to do a thing, come hell or high water, and how that's difficult. And it's not just him in the movie, it's his dad, it's his mom. Like you're seeing it in lots of versions of that. People who, there's an interesting, and I think very, it's not a spoiler, but it kind of, it gives you a toehold on how to approach this movie. He meets an uncle that he had never met before his teen years, who ran off to work in silent movies and the circus and stuff. Like, you know, because he's an old man now in the 60s. So like around the turn of the century, he was doing all that stuff. And he's telling his uncle about all how these movies he wants to make, and like he's showing him storyboards of like this war movie he's going to do with his friends and everything, and his uncle's just taking it all in. And his uncle gives him kind of a, I'm not going to go into the details of it, but a really sort of interesting talk where he was like basically saying like, I can tell you love this more than you love all the things that are keeping you from doing it. And the things that are keeping you from doing it are your family. So like, ergo, like you love your art more than you love your family, and you're going to have to make a choice at some point. And it's going to be painful, but you're going to have to decide. And that, I think a lot of the movie is about that. And again, with different people, you're watching different people making different choices in that dilemma. What am I going to do? Am I going to not do all the things that make me happy and be miserable? Or I'm going to do all the things that make me happy and be miserable? So that, it's interesting. It's great. I think it's really good. I would definitely recommend it. It's not what I expected. I expected it to be way more of a love letter to cinema. I expected it to be way more young Steven Spielberg sitting in audiences watching Lawrence of Arabia or something, you know. And it's actually, it sort of starts that way. You think, oh, that's what I expected. And then it becomes more what I was talking about before, about like, you're one of these people that's a little obsessed that you need to make things, or you need to do this thing, or you need to chase this dream, or you want to see how far you can go down this path. And, you know, it's sort of picking like what is going to make you cry in life, doing it or not doing it. Both are going to make you cry, but you got to figure out which is the thing. Choose the thing that's going to break your heart. That to me is what I took from it. But, yeah, which was another barrier, and that's a good example, you know, of like very easily arguably, an unfair barrier of entry. Okay. But a barrier of entry, nevertheless, that sort of limited what's finally navigating all these obstacles. And what are we ending up with? And the open question of like, was that, yes, it was bad, but was it all bad? That kind of goes back to Keen's thing about like gatekeepers did have some value. They had some value. They weren't great. They got it wrong. Could be grossly unfair. But at the very least, there was some purpose being served there. And what are we going to replace that with? I think that's the optimistic, hopeful, you know, going forward thing, is like, how do we, so now we're doing this thing where, you know, it's all out there now. Anyone who wants to participate can, which is, I think, good. How now are we finding, how does the cream rise to the top now? You know, and that I think is still the open question. We haven't figured that part out yet. I'm hopeful that we will. But less barrier to entry. I'm trying to get in the habit of reading the comments rather than quietly, like reading aloud the comments rather than just, okay. Less barrier to entry means there is a lot more content, yes. So it makes it just as hard to stand out and achieve your dreams. What do you think about that, smarty pants? First of all, there's no reason to get aggressive. Second, no, I fully agree. I think when that's something that, again, I'm not co-signing everything Keen says. I think he's kind of a provocateur and he says kind of things to make people debate it. But this is what he would say. He would say the problem is, I think if I'm going to paraphrase, I think Keen would say, you're not going to get a Scorsese or a Spielberg or a Christopher Nolan or any of these today because of the glut of content, because there's no way for them to stand out. That there is something about the old system, bad and as perfect as it is. I want to make it very clear. I'm not arguing for the old system. The old system was bad, sure. Noted, conceded, stipulated. But it made it so when the people who could navigate it, the ones that came out the other end, the dozen people who survived that hell week, like, there's like a base level of ability there. Like, and it's easier to find the good stuff because it's not a million movies to watch. It's 100 movies to watch. This is what Keen would be saying. He's like, we needed gatekeepers. We needed goalposts. We needed obstacles. Because it thinned the herd, and in theory, like very Darwinian, what you're ending up with is the best of the best. I would think that's what he would say. I'm not saying I agree or disagree, but sounds like you're a great big fan of Andrew Keen. Bowfinger, I forgot about that. Keen can suck it. No, it sounds like... I think his book, the book that I read years ago that was interesting and I think about all the time, because it comes up all the time in the modern world, is Cult of the Amateur. This idea that, and again, without getting into the rightness or wrongness of it, the situation that creates a scenario where a game show host seems like a better choice for president of the United States than a career bureaucrat. Like, that is Cult of the Amateur in action. That is enough people getting to the point where they say, what does an expert know anyway? What does a scientist know anyway? What is, book learning? That creates that environment where that can happen, where you're on the plane and it's going down and someone is like, I've never flown before, but certainly I couldn't do as bad as the pilot, that's Cult of the Amateur. Anyway, let's see. It's true, very possible. Assuming we're here in 60 years. I love having you, Paul. I'm glad we were able to have an easier ability to make housewives of fill in the blank and Kardashians. Yes. Yeah, see. Again, if you wanted to be a mega Keen disciple, this is what happens when you have 500 channels. This stuff. When there are 4 channels, the stuff that gets on, in theory, it needs to be legit, Not saying the system worked all the time. It didn't, or it worked in the wrong way. But the idea is when you just open it up, open the floodgates, let's just put it all on TV. Let's just put it all out there. Let's self-publish every book. Let's whatever. Again, I'm self-published. I'm not, But now it's just like, how do you find anything? How do you find what's good? How do you know what's good? It's almost like there was a point, I feel like, where early on, it made it easier to find the good stuff than it was before. And now we've passed that and it's dropped off, and it's even harder to find the good stuff than it's ever been. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, I hope so. I hope these years will be known as the Jim Lujan era. To me, and I'm not just saying this because Jim's a friend of mine, but Jim is one of the people I think of when I think about how hard it is to find stuff. Like, to me, I feel like if somehow Jim's movies had been on when I was in junior high or high school, I know me and my friends would have been obsessed with them. Like, way more than stuff we were watching, you know? And it's when I see creators like Jim, where it's like, this guy should be blowing up. And I feel like in a previous era, he would have been blowing up. But because there's just so much out there, the trick is like, how are people even finding Jim? And that's the case, I think, for almost everyone in the chat and everyone in our sort of extended Artcasters community. It's these people who, I think any one of them in any other era, this is the flip side of it. We're all out there making our thing, and that's great. And it's harder than ever for anyone to notice our thing, because there's just so much stuff. And you're not just competing against other animators or other movie makers or other comic people or other writers. You're competing against, like, people dancing on TikTok or doing lingerie try-ons on YouTube. Like, like it's this ocean, and staying away from Keen's pejorative ocean of garbage. It's just an ocean of content. Like, this endless ocean of content. And that's what, like, our friend Corey is talking about all the time with, like, the algorithm and what's getting boosted and what are you even seeing? Like, this is all, we're talking about all the same thing here, One of us could do one of the greatest works of all time and share it on YouTube and Instagram and Facebook and all these places, and maybe 14 people see it. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. This is the hellscape future that these algorithm writers are hoping for. These people who are like, actually, and I again, I don't want to talk that's the most I want to creep into the AI thing, and just like my concern that there's no barrier that love is not a prerequisite anymore, and that's a problem for good art, in my opinion. But I'm telling you, I'm going to the Phoenix Comic Con in June. If I see some AI stuff printed in Artist Alley, I'm gonna pop a blood vessel, guys. Like, no. I'm gonna get thrown out of there a couple days early. Nice. Go watch football. Anyway, that's my soapbox rant. I fully recognize that to a lot of people, it just probably sounds like old man, last gen. Yeah, you don't get it. You don't get it. I don't know, maybe I don't. Totally possible. Maybe you don't get it. I think this is the good thing that's come out of AI imagery. I think it should be forcing a lot of us, if not all of us, to really think about whether it matters or not and why. I think it's forcing us to do it's something I think I told Corey a few months ago. I always hated the conversation about what is art, because to me it seems like I've been an artist my whole life. I've gone to all the classes. I've had all those friends. It just, to me, is one of those like stupid, like dipshit goes nowhere late night dorm room conversations that basically I'm not interested in, because I feel like it never goes, like, you can't get anywhere with it. It just ends up being this thing of like, everything is art, nothing is art. Like, it's just stupid. And I just don't want to have that talk until AI generated imagery came on the scene. And there was something about seeing that helped me articulate what I do think art is, and that this is not it. That art is something different. Art is about saying something via craft. And that's something that you're not seeing with AI imagery. Like, I think that is an inherent part of it. It's helping me think more seriously about art. And I'm hoping it's doing, even if people fall on the side of like, it's fine, it's cool. If any good comes of it, it's like thinking about it. It's making you think about it, making you think about, do you think it's okay or not? Why or why not? Do you think, are you interested in this or not? Why or why not? I think, and my hope, and I've said this for a few months now, from the beginning of it, is that it will eventually lead to people appreciating work that is conceived and crafted and fashioned and intentional, being like having a premium on it. That's what people are interested in. The analogy I've been using a lot, because I think it kind of sums up, like, could Boston Dynamics make a robot that could outswim a person at the Olympics? Of course. Would anyone want to watch it? No. Because whether we can intellectually articulate it or not, we know intuitively that the Olympics isn't just about the time, or like how many laps can you do in the pool. It's about the story of the person that had to work to get there to be able to do that. That's what we're celebrating. That's what we're interested in. That's what we're watching. I think we need to cultivate that same reaction when it comes to art and art products. Could AI someday write a beautiful novel or a symphony or whatever? Let's just say yes. Let's say yes. But I want it to be like a robot swimming in the Olympics. Who fucking cares? I want to see a person do that. Like, that's what's fascinating. That's what's interesting. That's what's inspiring. And that's what's I'm going to get something out of. Like, I want to watch a person play chess. I don't want to watch a computer play chess. I don't care. Could a computer beat everybody in the world at chess? Sure. I don't want to watch it. I don't care. I don't want to see a robot throw a Hail Mary pass. I mean, I do kind of want to see that. That could be pretty cool to watch. But I'm not as interested in seeing like a person throw this amazing pass or make this crazy field goal attempt, like, and actually make it. That's more interesting to me. And I think somehow, and I think it's a testament to our, our lack of appreciation of the arts in at least our corner of the world. Like, we just we don't think of it the same way. I think we think of art like a product, and we don't care about the process. And when it comes to like the Olympic, when it comes to sports, I think somehow, because we're a more sports oriented culture, we appreciate it's not about like how many free throws can you sink. Like it's about the person who decided he was going to be a basketball player and worked and worked and worked and worked and worked. And now this person is there with the crowd and all eyes on him and all the cameras and doing it. We want to see that. That's what we're responding to. We don't need to see a robot sink, like a little catapult robot just doing free throws all day long and sinking them. Who cares? Anyway. Spider-Man or Walt Kanye's expert. That's a title. I love Camille Paglia. Wow. Christopher, we have all the same references. Like, first of all, almost nobody I know is familiar with Andrew Keene. Just because I think he's a little obscure. And Camille Paglia, like, I love her. I think she's fascinating. I have a few of her books back there. And she is, I love to hear her talk about art and especially like rock and roll. Like she's I just think she's fascinating. And just like Keene, I'm not going to say like, and I agree with everything she says. Like she's also a little bit like Keene where she likes to say the thing to make you, respond to it, to make you think like, I disagree, but now I need to articulate why. Like she can be a little bit of a firebrand, but I really love reading her stuff. Like I think she's pretty interesting and definitely wakes up your neurons, I think. All right, let's see here. I'm trying to decide if I want to do some drawing and then do selfie pictures, or just get the selfie pictures out of the way and then just spend the rest of the time drawing. By the way, this is not strawberry. This is guava, which is fancier and snootier, arguably. Much to my chagrin. Guys, I'm eager to finally, it's still obviously months away, but I'm eager to finish this book. It's funny. So this is the third one. I'm almost done with it. The experience for each one has been totally different. The experience of doing it has been totally different. And I guess it's just in like learning the process and changing each time. But I was going to say, I feel like this time it's been both harder and easier than the past times. I think easier in some ways where it's like the process is familiar. I hate to, I don't want to discourage any young would-be artists out there, but I'd be curious if the experienced among us in the chat feel the same way. It's one of those things that maybe this only gets harder and harder because as you know more about it, you can be more intentional and thoughtful, and therefore it gets harder, I always would have imagined that the first one I did would be the hardest because I'd never done a comic before. And that's not how it's been going. This has been the hardest, and I don't know why. But in some ways, these, like the process, it feels familiar. And I set out after 97. 97 was hard. I feel like I limped across the finish line with 97. And I had made up my mind with this one I want to get back to, I want to get my head straight for it, where I need to enjoy this more. Which that sounds like a good way to not enjoy it. It's like you need to enjoy this. You will have a good time. But it's not like that. It's just like, I do like drawing. I do like creating. I like to see stuff get finished. Like I need to concentrate on that through this process. Where I think toward the end of 97 it started to feel a lot just like work. Just felt like a job that I just wasn't, you know. And in some way, I think in a lot of ways I was successful. Like I think I went with the flow better this time. I feel far less fried, like nearing the end. I hope that holds out. It needs to hold out until about mid-March. But like I was more, I think in the ways you needed to, I surrendered to the process. In other ways, I knew how to manage it better. I think I was more open to the frustrations, like allowing those just play out. I think I had more trust in my ability. It's like it'll eventually get there. There might be rocky parts or frustrating parts, but eventually it's going to get there. Like so, in a lot of ways, I was way more zen. I think I had a healthier attitude about it. But yeah, like I think what Chris is saying here, your expectation of yourself becomes more intense, and therefore it becomes more. You may be having a better go of it, but it's also more exhausting. And I think that's what I'm finding with this. Like the more this goes on, like it gets easier in some ways and it gets way harder in others. But yeah, like I'm thinking about being done with this and I'm thinking about what it will be like to actually have it and read it. Well, first I'm going to rewind a little bit. I did D vs. Zem 1975. Got the proof. I think I videoed myself going through the proof. If you go back, and sure it's in my YouTube somewhere. And I got emotional. It was like overwhelming to finally see like this thing, this cumulative effort, like done. To be able to flip through, just remembering like, I remember when I was drawing that. Like it's an actual thing now. This is actually a comic. Like I was totally, all the work, all the time, all the struggle, all of it, like, and then all the ideas and all the dreams and all the vision and everything, all of those things being represented by this book. It was emotional for me to look at it. When 97 came along, and I did that, and it was a struggle and it was hard. And by the end, I was out of gas. Got the proof of that, went through it. Wasn't nearly the same emotional experience. Like it was great. It's always satisfying to see it done, but it didn't get to that part where like I felt actually overwhelmed. Okay. Now compare this time, just me imagining what this will be like to see done makes me a little emotional. Like I can feel it. And I can't make any sense of like this weird, like there's no obvious slope that I can think in my mind, like, oh, so, it gets easier and easier, it gets harder and harder, it gets more and more satisfying, or it gets more and more whatever. Like it's a strange, I can't quite figure out what predicts that. It's strange. But it's part of that journey, I guess, and kind of fun and kind of interesting. And one last thought about that is a barrier of entry, like the suffering, the doing it, the working, being frustrated, the toiling away, months and months. And it results right now, what I'm experiencing, in a very complicated mix of emotions. That's something that you are, and that to me, I think is part of this. part of this for me is the things you learn about yourself on the journey. When you've removed all the barriers of entry, there's no journey, and therefore you're denying yourself that part of the experience. And I don't mean this in a snarky way. I really, really don't. I mean it very, very earnestly. It makes me sad that some creators are never going to get that hit, or that, and it's not even a hit, that reveal the complexity that arises from the long journey. There's no shortcut to get to that. The Lord of the Rings trilogy couldn't be 2.5 hours. It just wouldn't play the same way. You have to, you have to go all the way to Mordor with these over 9 hours. And like, I think there are some things, that I believe the artist's journey should have there should be some personal fulfillment and some, not even fulfillment, but there's an experience to it that you're denying yourself if you don't have enough love and you're not willing to do all the work. It's just, not even saying it's good or bad, not saying should or shouldn't. I want to let people know you're not having the full experience, and you want the full experience. The full experience is what's valuable. Anyway. How are you doing, man? I haven't seen you in a while. Which, by the way, I'm going to be placing an order probably sometime this week or next week at the latest. I have one of my tabs that is your shop, and I'm trying to sort through like what I think I want to order. So yeah, there's nothing quite like seeing the finished thing printed for the first time. Like it's hard to even describe what that, especially again after the long journey. It's again, I mean, I feel bad for people who are somehow denying themselves the patience and the toil that goes into doing it, and maybe in a more difficult way. It all results in a different kind of payoff in the end. And no snark. Like I said, like I feel bad that some people aren't getting that because they've made it a little too easy. They've paved the swamp a little too much. Like it's an analogy I think I used for some other topic last time was it's like running through the old Nintendo game Contra with an invincibility code on. It's not the same. You're not having the same experience as someone who finishes Contra without the invincibility code. They're having a totally different triumph than the person who just basically held right and hit the fire button, for an hour with the invincibility on. It's a different experience. And you want the experience, like not everyone's going to have it. Not everyone's going to be able to sit and learn Contra. But if you do, if you're willing to do the work, you're going to have a peak experience that just, there's no equivalent. Anyway. Thank you, man. Look, one of these days, when I get this book done, here, we're making a plan right now. When I get this book done, and I'm not drawing, and I can drift more with my streams. First of all, I'm not going to stream once a week once I'm done drawing. This is mostly like a page a week, stream a week thing. I'll back off a little bit, but we're for something completely different. We're going to talk about old Nintendo games, which is perhaps my truest first love. So, and Contra will come up. Legend of Zelda, Bionic Commando. Come on, it's going to be amazing. It's a strange thing. I'm 7 pages from the end of A Village Haunted. And if you aren't feeling like this might be the best thing I've done, then you need to look at it some more. Yeah. Yeah, and it's tough too, because, I mean, and this is such a cliche. all the D versus M's are like my kids. Like, I'm not going to tell you like, this is my favorite, this is whatever. But you're always like, I think you have to believe your latest thing is the best thing you've done yet, you know? And people might end up disagreeing. Like, they might seem like, no. And I'm fully detached from that. Like, I know when 79 comes out, some people will read it and they'll say like, it was good. My favorite is still 97, or my favorite is still 75. Some people, 79 will be their favorite. Some people will say this is the best one yet. And other people will be like, it's good, but I liked. That's fine. That doesn't mean anything to me bad. Like, I wouldn't want people to feel the way I do, where they say like, if everyone felt like this new one is the best, better than the previous two, if they're always like liking the earlier ones less each time, that would be a bummer. I want, especially with an anthology, my goal is that when I have the 6 done, everyone has a favorite and they're all different, you know? Like, that's what I would like. But in my head, in my heart, you want, again, it's what Chris was talking about, where it's like, you know, you obligate yourself more as you go farther down the path. I'm always pushing where each one, I think, whatever my internal challenges, my goals, I'm always setting the bar a little bit higher for myself. That doesn't necessarily mean, therefore, it is a better book that people will enjoy more. That's a separate thing. It's just that this was I had to stretch more and flex more and lift more and be also a little more agile and dexterous in accomplishing this thing. That's all that game is being upped every time. I will tell you that each D versus M for me is more of a challenge. And that has nothing to do with how people will feel about it or whether they'll like it as much or whatever. This is just me like pushing farther each time, which also goes back to like, if you're not doing that, you're denying yourself some of the champagne victory. You know, and that's up to you. That's your journey. But I'm telling you, that's where a lot of the payoff comes from in this. Like, if you've ever wondered, why would Gary do this? Which I have asked myself many a time. Why would he spend a year plus drawing an indie comic that a couple hundred people will read or something, you know? Especially if it's not so, you know, first and foremost for those couple hundred people. It's for me, it's because I want to go on that journey. I want to hike the Appalachian Trail and come back and see how I've changed. I want to learn something about myself. That is what that's the struggle gets you. Okay? It's the revelation. It's you're sitting in the sweat lodge taking the peyote and having an experience. Like, you're going through the difficult thing to get to the payoff. That's what this is. It's all like, and I don't know how else to explain it to you if like that doesn't have any resonance with you. Still fondly recall the feeling of getting our first printed comic in my hands. Yes. Here you are plugging away and still getting excited for every book. Here we are. Yeah. Almost 10 years later. No, there's nothing like it. And especially if there was the plugging away, you know. Double Dragon. Absolutely. Absolutely. Kung Fu. Kung Fu is one of the first games I got for the Nintendo. I remember I got it at, I don't know where you're at here. And I don't know if it was nationwide or if it was just an Arizona thing. Here was Thrifty. Thrifty was like kind of like a drugstore, but this might be weird to people. In the mid to late 80s, places like Thrifty, which was a drugstore, had Nintendo games under a glass counter. And they had Kung Fu. And I remember I picked it up with paperboy money or bag boy money. I don't remember which job I had at the time. It's one of the first, probably like the third Nintendo game I ever got. Because I know the first one I had was Legend of Zelda. I bought that before I even had a Nintendo. It came with Super Mario Brothers. I think no, so it would have been the fourth game I bought. Because the third game I bought, I had a Zapper, but I didn't have a game, if I remember right. I bought Wild Gunman. And then the next game after that, I can't believe I remember this, but it shows like I still love video gaming, but the Nintendo just changed my life. But the fourth game I think was Kung Fu. I'm pretty sure Kung Fu was the fourth game I picked up from the Nintendo. Yes. It's definitely a creator focused. I think my audience is almost entirely creatives of one form or another. So that's a hot take. I think you've upped your stats. Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate it. What is this? What is this? WWGDS. Help me out. Help me out. Is this a Nintendo reference? Is this something else? What is this? What else? What other big? Of course, Dragon Warrior was fun. But to me, nothing. It didn't hold a candle. Now this is one that I feel like not a lot of. I'm not doing the hipster thing of like, you probably haven't heard this game. You've probably heard of it. But the one that I really loved in terms of old school hardcore role-playing games on the Nintendo was Ultima Exodus. Ultima Exodus was my game. Like, I was nuts about that game. Played it obsessively for months and months and months. Like, that game it would be 100% in my top 10 Nintendo games of all time. I don't know if it'd make top 5. I would have to think about that. That's a tough list to make. But Ultima Exodus was incredible. Why would I do that? There we go. Yeah, we're doing a classic. We're going to do a series of classic gaming streams. We're going to start with. We'll do for an intro. We'll just talk a little bit about the Atari 2600. I liked my Atari 2600. I played it, but I hadn't developed the love yet. Like, I enjoyed it. I loved Missile Command for the 2600. Pitfall was fun. But when I got the Nintendo, that's when it took a new level. So we'll do a little bit on the 2600. We'll talk about the Nintendo. Well, actually, let's break it into generation. We'll do the 8-bit generation. Mostly on the Nintendo, a little bit on the Sega Master System. Then we'll move on to 16-bit. We'll talk about Genesis and Super Nintendo. Maybe fold in the TurboGrafx 16, which technically is probably an 8-bit system. If you're a video game nerd, retro video game nerd, you know there's some, depends. We're going to call it 16-bit because it was basically competing in that generation. And then we'll see where we go from there. But I need to talk about arcades. I can't wait. This is another reason to finish this so I can talk about one of my first loves, classic video games. Okay. I'm going to get to work. Oh, yeah. We'll do a little handheld stuff. Because I had the original Game Boy. I never had a ton of, but I had most of the Game Boys. I had the Game Boy, I had the Advance, I had the DS. I think I skipped the Color. I don't think I ever had the Game Boy Color. I've never been a huge handheld gamer just because I want a big screen. Like I want to be able to sit on the couch and see, like I don't want to have to, do this. And is the tech of the time, but the fact that a lot of those early Game Boys weren't even backlit they were fun. I mean, they're very cool, but remember what a pain it was to actually find the right environment to actually see the screen on this thing. Like you had to get the lamp just right to really see. It wasn't backlit. It was like looking at just a digital watch face with no light. Depending on the light, like if there was no lighting in your room, like there's no playing the game in bed before bedtime with the lights off. Like you're not going to see it. You need like something over your shoulder bright enough to see the screen, but then you're also playing with the angle so you're not getting the reflection of it was not a great experience. It was fun at the time, but yeah, I have I'm looking over here because I don't know if it's down here or in my closet. I have the Game Boy Pocket, the one that folds like a flip phone. I have one of those. Okay, cool. So just so I know, I think I have it worked out, but we're in different time zones. When you send the info, send what time zone you're in so I can do the math and figure out what that is for me. Because I'm in one of those bizarro time zones where Arizona's its own thing. So I need to do the math to make sure I'm there on time. But I'm looking forward to it. Okay, guys, I'm going to draw. I will see you next week. Well, this week, I guess, on Saturday. I think I'm going to shoot for the normal time. So 11 a.m. my time, Saturday. Hopefully, I will be starting hopefully I'll be starting a new page. I think I should be. I think this page that I'm working on right now, barring any kind of weird thing this week, I should be able to wrap it up and be starting a new page on Saturday. So I will see you then. Have a good week. If you are a creative, like most of the people here, good luck. Stick to it. I'm proud of you. You're my kin. You're my tribe. No matter how you feel about AI art. Paul, if you come back to watch the rest of this, no matter how you feel about Andrew Keen, I'm a fan of you. Is that Mr. Rogersy? You're very special. I like you just the way you are. Anyway, see you guys next week, or this week. See you guys Saturday.